Okay, continuing where we left off, what we were talking. So just to reiterate what was said at the last segment, the culture of American nutrition today is fast, easy, processed, pre-prepared meals, as well as eating out for meals a lot. Just sort of this idea that portion control is not really something we look at. We look at more for less money. That is typically what we value here in the United States. And then, of course, our sedentary lifestyles, really just this idea of convenience. Everything needs to be convenient, which results in plenty of food, but not nutritionally sound food. So that just kind of brings us really to the next point. What is nutritionally sound food? And so let's talk a little bit about nutrients and the importance of nutrients in our diet. Nutrition is the science that actually studies the relationship between diet and health, and it is a dynamic foundation of our health, and that's truly the case. We can't go without food for long periods of time. We have to consume food to survive. It is a vital component to our health, and I hope that you will see that as we go through Nutrition 101. A diet contains sort of these pillars. There's the basic pillars of fat, protein, and carbohydrates. We call these our macronutrients. It also includes necessary combination of calories and the nutritional value of those calories. So these 2 points are key. What it basically is saying is that we need to have the right type of calories, right combination of calories. So it can't all come from one source, okay? So the right combination and the right amount for what we need as individuals based on our height and weight, BMI. How many calories do you need to really sustain your life and to do the activities that you need to do? So we have this necessary combination and amount of calories, which is individualized for the individuals. But then we also have to look at what are those calories coming from? What's the nutritional value of those calories? Because not every calorie is equal in the sense of nutrition. And it's this key component that we're missing in the United States. We have to focus on the nutritional value of our calories far more than just getting food. Typically, I say the rule of thumb is 80-20. 80% of the time we need to eat nutritionally sound food, and 20% of the time we can have those simple little pleasures. Remember, the purpose of eating is to provide nutrients to the body in order for the body to function properly. It's not for enjoyment. That's a side effect of nutrition. It's a side effect to enjoy good, savory foods. But the primary purpose of eating is truly to provide our body the nutrients it needs to do what it needs to do. That should be our first focus, but unfortunately in the United States our cultural perspective is different. It's all about enjoyment and convenience and less about fueling our bodies to do the work that we need it to do. So what are some of the general functions of nutrients? Well, they help with growth and development, regulate cell and body processes, and provide fuel for metabolic functions. The absence of one nutrient can result in severe health consequences. I often tell people to have the visualization of holding a plate on your hand. So you have your 5 fingers holding up a plate. Each of those 5 fingers with your palm representing the 6th class of nutrient, which I would say would be water, it's kind of the foundation of it all, is holding up that plate. As I take away one of those components, it's no longer am I able to really hold that plate because of and steady it because I've lost those components. As soon as I take away one finger, that plate is going to dip. And that's the idea. Just the absence of one can cause severe consequences. So we can't say, oh, as long as I get this, I'm okay. You really want to get all of it. So what are the 6 classes of nutrients? Well, we have fat, protein, and vitamins. The fat, protein, and carbohydrates, these are called our macronutrients. Vitamins and minerals, which are called our micronutrients. And then the final one is water, which I would say is sort of the foundational necessity of life. I mean, most of our bodies are made up of water. Most of our world is made up with water. We can live a week or 2 without food. We can only go maximum 3 days without water. So it's essential to our body and something that we need to really consider. So let's talk a little bit about macronutrients here. So macronutrients are our pillars of diet. They're really the source of fuel for the body in terms of energy, and they contribute significantly to the maintenance of cell tissues and body structures. In other words, we need all 3 in order for our body to function properly. The only time we eliminate a macronutrient or reduce it is when we have a disease state. There's a lot of fads in our country that says you should do this in order to improve your health, but that's not necessary for every individual. Individuals that have certain disease states need to do certain things, but for most of us who are generally healthy, we need to consume all of these macronutrients, and I'm going to go through each one. Carbohydrates is our primary source of energy in our body. Okay, it's a quick fuel source, providing us 4 kilocalories per gram. It's the fuel source our body prefers to utilize on most cases, especially when we're up, active, and moving. Our body requires somewhere around 45 to 65% of our diet to come from carbohydrates. Where do we get carbohydrates? From grains, vegetables, legumes, and fruit. Yes, vegetables and fruit are carbohydrates. There's simple sugars that would form into glucose. These come from our fruits and some of our vegetables. And then there's complex, which is fiber. Fiber is largely found in our whole wheat products and in our legumes, and also in vegetables and fruits if we eat the whole vegetable and the whole fruit. Carbohydrates are not the enemy. The only time individuals need to really cut this out, and in particular cut out grain-related carbohydrates, is when they have to be on a gluten-free diet due to GI issues. But for most of us, we can consume a regular diet of carbohydrates. Primarily, it should come from vegetables and fruits, and then we should have our whole wheat products. This would be breads, pastas, and our other whole grains, if you don't eat your bread and pastas, would be rices, quinoa, and couscous, as they involve and brown rices or wild rices in particular provide good carbohydrates. Legumes are your lentils or your beans. They're going to serve as both a carbohydrate and a protein source, but they're vital for our overall development. Fats are lipids or liquid, and they are separated into two ways: saturated fat or unsaturated fat. Unsaturated fat is liquid at room temperature. Saturated fat is solid at room temperature. Saturated fat usually comes from our animal products, where unsaturated fat comes from more of our vegetable-containing fats, such as olive oils. Our fats need to be somewhere usually between 20 and 30% of our total diet. 20% is more of a lower to moderate fat intake, which is typically recommended for those who want to lose weight. 30% maybe for just a growing individual. So we're looking at somewhere between 20 and 25% for most individuals in terms of their diet. We want predominantly, I'd say about 80 to 90% of that to come from our unsaturated fats, and then only about 10 to 20% coming from our saturated fats. We want to avoid trans fats altogether. It's a synthetic man-made fat that has absolutely no nutritional value to our body. In fact, it has been shown to cause diseases. We find trans fats out of most products, but it is in some of our sort of unnatural types of products or processed foods, such as baked goods and things that you find in the store. Cholesterol is found in any food that has an animal product or uses eggs. The yolk of an egg is pretty much all cholesterol. Shrimp is also almost predominantly all cholesterol as well, or has a large percentage of it. So we have to be careful with those. And we also have to understand that fat provides 9 kilocalories per gram. This is going to be our fuel source that we store. It's a slower generating fuel source. It takes longer to process this, but it does provide us more calories per gram. So we typically utilize our fats when we're at rest or doing very low activities. So that's primarily what your body's burning when you're sitting or when you're lightly moving around the house. Fats are vital to our health, and so we do have to consider, we have to have them in our diet, but we need to control them. So typical sources of fat would be our cheeses, dairy products, meat products, some of our olive oils, those would be unsaturated. Our nuts, seeds also have fats in them, but those are going to be our unsaturated fats. Protein is somewhere between 15 and 30% of your diet, depending on your individual needs. most of us are probably going to be around that, if we're eating around 50% from carbohydrates, 25% from fat, we're about 25% protein. You can get them animal-based meat products or plant-based through beans. It's comprised of amino acids that are the building blocks for basically everything that you have in your body. These amino acids are found either as essential or non-essential. Essential is not manufactured by the body or is manufactured in insufficient amounts. In order for us to get the essential vitamins, we need to consume proteins through meat and plant-based products. If you are a vegetarian or even possibly vegan, you absolutely need to see a dietitian to discuss your protein sources. Most vegetarians and vegans lack the essential amino acids that they need because they're not eating the the plant-based products such as beans in a way that provides them the right combination of essential amino acids that they need to absorb. So it's really vital, or else you're lacking nutrients. Again, these are the building blocks of almost everything we have in our body, and so our body actually prefers not to use protein as a fuel source. It can in dire circumstances, but we would rather preserve it and just use it to rebuild the proteins that our body needs in our system. That offers us about 4 kilocalories per gram, but again, this is the last sort of place we want to go with protein, and we also want to be careful that we are utilizing it, again, in a way that is replenishing what our body needs and not overusing it. Whether you eat too many carbohydrates, too many fats, or too many proteins, if you're consuming too many calories, regardless of the macronutrient source, you will store it as fat. That is the only way we store energy in our body. These are the three primary sources of energy that we receive for our body. So if you're consuming too much of any one macronutrient over calories, it will be stored as fat. If you're over consuming any one macronutrient, it could result in disease states for you because your body is not having an adequate combination. I'd like to take a few minutes just to talk about fats here. Individuals that are on an extremely high fat diet, such as what we hear with carnivore diets today, really are only beneficial for those individuals that have things like epilepsy, seizures, those kind of things. We usually do ask them to have a higher fat diet because it does seem to help with that disease state. Although for most other individuals, it's really not that beneficial from what we know right now. The other note I want to make is protein, because many individuals believe when they exercise with resistance training, they need that higher level of protein of almost 30%. That 30% recommendation is really only recommended for our professional athletes that are doing resistance style exercise on a regular basis. Basically, it is their job. Otherwise, if you're only doing resistance training a few days a week, a general amount of protein is fine. You don't need to add any more protein to that. A well-balanced diet is all you need. Let's say you take it up a notch and you are doing it a little bit more actively to try and build muscle. Let's say maybe you're doing some sort of resistance training workout 5 to 7 days a week. You're probably still only needing about 20% of your diet from protein, a slightly more increase in protein, not astronomical amounts. Your body will, one, if you aren't burning enough calories, store it as fat, and two, it can also cause damage to areas of your body because of its difficulty in processing it. So we just really want to be careful with protein as we consider those sources for our food when it comes to resistance training. Most of the general population can barely meet aerobic activity, let alone meet resistance training guidelines. So in general, most individuals do not need protein supplementation after workouts. They just need to eat a well-balanced diet. Okay, so these are our macronutrients that provide energy, and this gives you a good understanding of those and its relationship to disease states. We're going to be moving forward in the next segment and taking a look at micronutrients and the importance of these aspects in our diet. These are pillars of nutrition. They're imperative for cell and body processes. Each one is essential for various aspects, And water is probably one of the most simplest and essential nutrients that our body needs.